Hi, I'm Merrick. And 3 nights ago, my wife slammed divorce papers on my chest in front of 100 people, her voice cutting through the music like a knife. She called me a failure. Her father laughed and said I was pathetic, broke, disposable. And the room, they clapped. They thought they were burying me. But none of them knew. My father had just made me the sole heir to a $575 billion empire. They tried to shame me out of the life they stole. But by morning, every single one of them would wish they'd kept their mouths shut. You ever watched people dig their own graves while they thought they were throwing dirt on yours? I pulled into my parents' driveway just as the porch lights flicked on. Evening gatherings at their place always felt the same to me, no matter the reason or the season. Tonight was meant to celebrate my older brother winning a local business award, and the whole house buzzed before I even reached the front steps. I paused at the door for a moment, taking a breath, letting the noise settle through the frame. I already knew where the night would place me. Somewhere along the edges, close enough to witness, but never close enough to matter. Inside, warmth and chatter spilled through the hall. Coats hung on every hook, reminders of how full the house was when everyone else came home. I walked through the living room, nodding at a few greetings that barely cut through conversation. It wasn't rude, exactly. It was just practiced. They had patterns, and I had my place inside those patterns. By the time I reached the dining room, every seat at the long table had someone in it. My mother pointed without looking up from her conversation. "You can sit there, Merrick." The spot she meant was near the service entrance, the chair closest to where the catering staff stepped in with fresh plates. I moved toward it without breaking stride. That chair was always waiting for me, no matter the occasion. I set my coat behind the seat and lowered myself. The chair wobbled a little, one leg uneven against the tile. A steady stream of cold air from the vent brushed the back of my neck. Across the room, my brothers leaned in toward my father, laughing about something from work. I listened without trying to join in. I'd learned long ago that the conversation moved just fine without me. Watching them now tugged loose a string of old memories. School ceremonies where my father clapped loudly for my brothers, then folded his arms by the time my name appeared in the program. The holiday photos where they positioned me slightly behind the others, so the height looked even, though I was barely an inch taller. I didn't resent it the way I used to. I'd settled into an understanding, the kind that grows slowly like sediment. You don't feel it building until one day the weight surprises you. The smell of roasted chicken drifted in as servers brought out the main dishes. One of them handed me a stack of spoons as though I worked there. I lifted the spoons slightly and looked around for where to set them. My mother caught sight of the moment and laughed softly. "He blends in too easily," she said to the table. A few chuckles followed. I smiled along because that was easier than asking why the joke always fell on me. When my father rose to make a toast, everyone quieted. He spoke proudly of my brothers, reciting details of their careers, their milestones, their families. I waited for the rhythm of his voice to shift toward me, even briefly. It didn't. He raised his glass. I touched mine lightly to the table so it wouldn't seem like I hesitated. Dessert arrived and vanished in the usual blur. People drifted into smaller circles of talk, and I found myself half listening to stories I wasn't part of. The chair creaked as I shifted, trying to ease the pressure building behind my ribs. Nights like this left me wondering whether my efforts to avoid conflict had protected anyone or just made me easier to forget. Eventually, the energy in the room softened and people began preparing to leave. I pushed my chair back, picked up my coat, and slipped through the side of the dining room. No one noticed I was the first to stand. No one asked if I'd be at the next gathering. I didn't take it personally anymore, but the quiet of it followed me down the hallway. Outside, the cool night air felt clearer than anything inside had. I walked toward my car, keys in hand, replaying the dinner as though searching for a moment I might have misread, but it was all too familiar. The kind of familiarity you stop questioning because it never changes. As I reached the driver's door, a thought pressed against me, sharp enough to hold my breath still for a second. The engine hummed as I pulled out of my parents' driveway, my tie still loose from the dinner that felt more like background noise than a celebration. I didn't turn the radio on, just drove in silence, letting the yellow streetlights smear across the windshield. Celeste had texted me 3 hours ago. "Don't be late this time, it reflects on me." Not us, me. That word stuck harder than it should have. The Armitages lived just 20 minutes away, nestled in one of those manicured neighborhoods where even the hedges looked expensive. I parked along the curb because the driveway was already full. BMWs, a Tesla, even a gleaming black Suburban with dealership plates. It was Clive's night, after all. He'd just been handed the reins to their family business like it was a birthright. Logistics firm, third generation, legacy stuff. I straightened my collar before heading to the front door. From the windows, I could see people already mingling inside, hands full of flutes, not plastic cups. Music floated out, soft jazz like something you'd hear in a hotel lounge. When I stepped in, the scent of lavender and polished wood wrapped around me. Celeste stood near the stairs holding a wine glass, posture perfect. She caught my eye but didn't move. Her mother, Miriam, spotted me first. Her smile was tight, thin as thread. "Oh, Merrick made it," she said, loud enough for the 3 guests near her to hear. "We were wondering if he had a car trouble again." There was polite laughter, the kind that cuts sharper because it pretends not to. I nodded slightly, answering, "No, just came from my family's dinner." Celeste walked over, not to greet me, but to guide me by the elbow toward a group of guests near the dining area. "Smile more," she whispered through her teeth. "Try not to stand like you don't know where you are." She turned toward the group. "Everyone, this is my husband, Merrick. He works somewhere in project management." Her smile didn't quite land. Stable enough, I guess. There was a moment. That kind of moment where you're sure everyone noticed, but no one will acknowledge it. I nodded politely. The man in a navy suit beside me raised his glass in a half toast and said, "Ah, behind every successful woman, right?" They chuckled again. I stood there, not angry, not yet. Just shrinking. Inside. You tell yourself these things don't matter. That you're stronger than this. That you're not here for validation. But when your name gets reduced to a placeholder at your own wife's side, something small inside starts to tear. Dinner was set buffet style, but the table had assigned seats anyway. A white tablecloth ran the length, with candles glowing between plates. I glanced around for my spot. Each name card was beautifully printed. Clive Armitage, CEO-elect, Miriam Armitage, Peter Armitage. My eyes kept scanning, expecting Merrick Dalton in similar script. Instead, I found a single card at the far corner. M. Just that. One letter. Like a footnote. I picked it up slowly, held it between my fingers longer than I should have. Then, without thinking too much, I slipped it into my jacket pocket. Something told me it would mean more later, even if I didn't know how. I stood near the wall while the others settled into their chairs. No one gestured for me to join them. Celeste walked by and whispered, "Why are you standing like that? You make it weird. Engage with people. Try not to look so lost." I looked at her. Really looked. "I'm trying. I didn't know there were expectations." She sighed and smiled at the guests. "That's the problem, Merrick. You never know what's expected." Clive clinked his glass for attention. "Can I have a minute, everyone?" He stood at the head of the table, confident, basking in the glow of inherited success. Everyone quieted down. "I just want to say thank you," he began, "to my family, to everyone who supported me. Taking over the company isn't just about business, it's about legacy, and I plan to honor that." Applause. Then Peter Armitage, Celeste's father, chimed in from his seat. He raised his glass and added, "And let's not forget Merrick." He paused. "The man who proves you don't need ambition to survive. Just marry well." The room burst into laughter. Real, sharp, shoulder-shaking laughter. My heart didn't pound. It sank. The kind of sinking that pulls your ribs tight from the inside. I smiled. I smiled because there was nothing else to do. Because if I stood up and said what I wanted to say, I'd be the one ruining the evening. I'd be the joke and the punchline. Celeste didn't look at me. No one did. Later, as the laughter faded into light chatter, I found myself near the kitchen entrance. A few guests avoided my gaze. I could feel the questions behind their polite glances. Was he mad? Was he offended? Will he make a scene? Celeste walked by and leaned in just enough to mutter, "Don't make this about you. Dad was joking. Don't embarrass us." The word "us" didn't feel like a team. It felt like a boundary, a line drawn with me on the wrong side of it. I stepped outside to the patio. The night air wasn't cold, but I folded my arms anyway, just to feel something solid around me. I looked through the glass at the people inside, laughing, drinking, moving past that moment like it hadn't cut someone down. I had been overlooked before, forgotten even. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't just ignored. I was used, the punchline, the soft target. The laughter inside had started to blend into one long, buzzing hum. I stood on the Armitage patio, hands in my pockets, staring out over the trimmed hedges and well-lit lawn. The soft whir of the ceiling fan above me, the scent of citrus candles. Every detail reminded me how polished this place was, how artificial it all felt when you knew you didn't belong. Through the sliding glass, I watched them, Celeste, Clive, Miriam, Peter, all moving in rhythm, like a practiced routine. They laughed easily. Their hands moved like they were always being watched. It was the kind of world that told you to keep your shoulders square and your smile effortless, even when someone took a shot at your dignity. I took a slow breath, exhaled, tried to shake off the sting of what had happened during the toast. I'd been insulted before, pushed aside in subtle ways, but this, it stayed. It didn't bounce off like it used to. It settled in. A breeze lifted slightly, brushing the side of my face. I stepped toward the railing, palms resting on the warm wood, and let myself drift into a memory I hadn't thought about in years. I was 12. My brothers were in the den, talking just loud enough to be heard through the cracked door. One of them had said, "Merrick'll probably end up someone's assistant or something, just happy to be in the room." They laughed. I stood in the hallway, just like I was standing now, outside, listening to something I wasn't meant to hear. I never told them, never brought it up, just told myself that being easygoing made things smoother, kept the peace, but peace doesn't mean much when it makes you invisible. A clink of glass behind me pulled me out of the memory. I turned slightly, caught a glimpse of Celeste crossing the kitchen, her heels clicking with purpose. She hadn't looked for me, hadn't even checked if I was still around. I pushed the door open quietly and slipped back inside. The temperature change was immediate, cooler, controlled. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Celeste was laughing with a couple near the drinks table. Clive had cornered a small group, talking animatedly about supply chain upgrades and private equity. No one saw me, or maybe they did, and chose not to. I started walking toward the coat closet to grab my jacket. Maybe I'd leave early. Say I wasn't feeling well. But then, just before I rounded the corner, I heard voices. Low, intimate. Miriam's voice first, sharp, amused. I honestly don't know what Celeste sees in him. I froze. Celeste replied, her voice quieter but not careful. I don't either, but he's harmless, and he pays half the bills, at least until I figure out what to do next. They both chuckled, not loud, not cruel on the surface, but that was what made it worse. Then Celeste added, "Don't worry, Mom. I'm not planning on keeping him around forever." My feet felt nailed to the floor, my chest hollowed out. The hallway spun slightly, not from motion, but from the sudden tilt of everything I thought I knew. I hadn't expected her to love me the way she did when we were 25, but I didn't expect to be a placeholder either, a budget line, something temporary. I stepped back carefully, heels not making a sound on the hardwood. I didn't want to see their faces. Didn't want them to see mine. Not like this. Back out on the patio, I leaned against the frame of the door and stared at nothing. My hands were trembling. It wasn't rage, at least not yet. It was something colder. A mix of betrayal and clarity. I replayed what I'd heard, trying to find any generous way to interpret it. There wasn't one. Celeste hadn't defended me at dinner because she believed in me. She'd done it because she was ashamed of me. Embarrassed that I might crack the image she worked so hard to maintain. And now I knew the truth. She didn't see me as her husband. She saw me as an obligation. I stood there, not moving, for what felt like a long time. The candle on the patio table flickered, casting a soft glow across the flagstone floor. Inside, someone turned the music up slightly. Life resumed in that house like I hadn't just overheard a conversation that split something wide open inside me. I thought of all the moments that came before this, comments I brushed off, the eye rolls when I shared ideas, the sudden changes in topic when I spoke too long, the moments she pulled her hand away a beat too quickly. It all made sense now. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being phased out. And here's the part that surprised me. I wasn't crushed. I was awake, not angry, not yet, but alert, aware. Like hearing a sound in your house that shouldn't be there and realizing something's been wrong for longer than you admitted. I stayed outside a few more minutes, letting the realization settle in my bones. When I finally stepped back inside, the party had shifted toward desserts and farewells. I moved through it like a shadow, untouched, unnoticed, but this time I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't hiding. Something was forming inside me, a line, a boundary, and I wasn't sure yet what I would do next. But I knew for certain what I wouldn't keep doing. The sunlight filtered through the blinds in streaks, falling across the dresser like sharp lines dividing one life from another. I opened my eyes slowly, still in my clothes from the night before. I hadn't planned to sleep. I must have collapsed from exhaustion sometime after 3. The silence in the house wasn't calming. It was thick, almost deliberate. I sat up and looked toward Celeste's side of the bed, already empty. No rustle, no scent of her shampoo, no motion, just stillness. That's when I saw them. A neat stack of papers, left carefully on top of the dresser. I didn't need to walk over to know what they were. Legal-sized, clipped together, no sticky notes or explanation. Just waiting, as if I'd requested them. Divorce documents. I stood there a moment, barefoot on the cold wood floor, letting the weight of the moment settle on my chest. No note, no conversation, no fight, just an execution. Even a resignation letter gets more ceremony than that. I picked them up and scanned the top page. Standard phrasing. Irreconcilable differences. No fault, no fire. Just closure. Clinically written and prepped for signature. I placed them back down without flipping further. A small part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to scream. Instead, I just walked into the kitchen. The house looked like it always did. Too clean, too symmetrical, like a magazine layout no one dared disturb. As the coffee brewed, I leaned on the counter and stared out the window above the sink. The neighbor's sprinkler spun in rhythmic arcs across a neatly trimmed lawn. I kept replaying last night. Her voice, her laugh, the certainty in her words. I'm not planning on keeping him around forever. I thought of every "I'm just tired," every "you're overthinking it," and how I'd chalked it up to stress, to pressure from her family, from work. I'd let myself believe being patient was a virtue, that giving her space was what good husbands did, but maybe I'd just been giving her space to plan my exit. My phone buzzed on the kitchen island. I grabbed it absent-mindedly, expecting a calendar alert or maybe a work email, but it was a text from an unknown number. You need to know what your wife is planning today. Check the folder before noon. I stared at the screen. No name, no image, just words that clung to the air. At first, I thought it was some sick joke, or worse, spam, but my gut twisted in a way that told me it wasn't random. I tapped the message and found a secure link. Hesitating, I hovered my thumb above it. Part of me said to leave it. Maybe I didn't want to know more, but that voice in my head, the one that kept me silent all these years, was quieter now. I clicked. The link opened a secure folder labeled Divorce Strategy, Phase 2. My throat went dry. Inside were screenshots, message threads between Celeste, Miriam, Clive, and a lawyer named Marcy Godwin. Each conversation dated, each time-stamped, each one cutting deeper than the last. One message from Celeste read, "He'll sign. He always does what keeps the peace." Another from Clive, "Push the emotional instability angle. Make him look dependent. The court will take care of the rest." I scrolled in disbelief. They'd been coordinating, strategizing. Not just a divorce, a takedown. They talked about freezing accounts, isolating assets, pressuring me into signing fast before he finds his footing. There were even drafts of statements they could use to explain the split to friends, to clients. Celeste had highlighted phrases like mutual decision and amicable separation while simultaneously working behind the scenes to gut me clean. My hands shook. I copied the folder to my laptop, double-checked the metadata. It was real. Too real. The names, the tone, the timestamps, all of it lined up with everything I'd felt but never confronted. But who sent it to me? Someone on the inside. Someone who'd heard enough to grow uncomfortable. Or maybe they wanted to use me. I couldn't know. Not yet. I sat at the table, heart racing. This wasn't just about a failed marriage anymore. It was about survival. The sound of the front door opening made me jolt upright. I quickly closed the laptop and slid the phone into my pocket. A beat later, Celeste walked into the kitchen, humming. "You're up early," she said, dropping her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. I nodded. Couldn't sleep. She smiled, light, casual. I picked up a couple things at the store, thought I'd make brunch. She opened the fridge, pulled out eggs, spinach, some overpriced goat cheese. She moved like nothing was wrong, like we hadn't stood on the edge of something irreversible. "You okay?" she asked, not looking at me. I nodded again. "Just tired." "Well," she said, cracking an egg into the pan, "you'll feel better after you eat." I watched her closely. Every movement calculated, smooth. I wondered how many other days she'd smiled like this while plotting something entirely different. I almost said it right then. Almost dropped everything on the table and asked her who Marcy Godwin was, if Clive helped her draft the strategy, if he'll sign was the only part she believed about me anymore. But I didn't, not yet, because for the first time, silence wasn't surrender, it was preparation. I needed to know more. I needed proof. I needed time. She set a plate in front of me, kissed my forehead absently. "Eat while it's hot." I gave her a thin smile. "Thanks." Inside, my mind was already moving. Through every account, every asset, every document I'd once thought didn't matter. I'd been foolish before, but not anymore. Because betrayal, once exposed, isn't just pain. It's a roadmap. And I intended to follow every turn. The knock came just after 1. Not loud, not rushed. Measured. As if whoever stood outside knew exactly what they came to do. I had just rinsed out my coffee mug and was drying my hands when I heard it. A soft rhythm against the front door. I hesitated. After everything that morning, every cell in my body was wired to expect the worst. I opened it slowly. An older man stood on the porch, his posture straight despite the weight of the heat. His gray suit was cleanly pressed, a conservative tie knotted high beneath his collar, wire-framed glasses perched on his nose, catching a glint of sunlight. "Merrick Dalton?" he asked, voice soft but formal. I nodded. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. No return address, no seal. Just my name across the front, handwritten in a familiar, slanted script. I knew that writing. I hadn't seen it in over a year, but I knew it better than my own. My father's. The man offered no explanation. He simply gave a slight nod, turned, and walked down the steps toward a dark sedan idling by the curb. The driver's door opened before he even reached it. A practiced rhythm. Routine. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds before closing it behind me and locking the deadbolt. Back in the kitchen, I set the envelope on the counter and just stared. Dad had been gone for nearly 8 months. Cardiac arrest, no warning, no time. 1 minute he was reading the paper, and the next, gone. He hadn't been much of a writer. His emails were short, his birthday cards generic. But this was something else. I slid a finger under the flap and opened it. The letter inside was dated 6 months earlier. "Merrick, if you're reading this, then the timeline I feared has come to pass." I sat down before I could finish the second line. The room felt colder. Or maybe it was me. He went on to explain that he'd kept quiet about a series of health scares, mini strokes, chest tightness, memory lapses. He hadn't wanted to worry me. Or anyone, really. But the letter wasn't just about his health. He wrote about regrets, about moments when he should have stood up for me and didn't, about how he let the louder voices in the family define my role and overlook my worth. He said he'd seen how I handled pressure, how I kept peace without surrendering dignity, even when people assumed that's what I was doing. "You are not the weakest link, Merrick," he wrote. "You are the one I trust to carry what truly matters." My throat tightened. Taped to the bottom of the letter was a small key, the kind you'd use for a bank deposit box. Beneath it, he'd scrawled, "When the time is right, open the lockbox. You'll understand everything then." I read it 3 times, maybe 4. Let the words settle in the cracks forming across my day. I hadn't cried when he died. Not at the service, not after. But I sat there now, gripping the letter, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel humiliated or angry. I felt shattered, because my father saw me. He saw what no one else did, and he left proof, not just in sentiment, but in instruction. I sat on the couch, the letter in my lap, elbows on knees. Was this why today had unfolded like it did? Was this his way of reaching from beyond the grave and saying, "Stand up, now"? I don't know how long I sat like that. Time blurred. The sunlight shifted across the room. My heartbeat slowed to something steady. Then I heard the front door open. Celeste's heels clicked across the entryway tile. I wiped my face and folded the letter back into the envelope. She walked in, holding a grocery bag and humming softly. "Hey," she said, glancing at me, then at the envelope. "Did someone drop off a bill? Not 'what is it' or 'are you okay,' but a bill." I looked up at her and didn't answer right away. Her voice wasn't warm. It wasn't curious. It was calculating, like she was measuring my reaction. The casual glance she tossed toward the paper wasn't innocent. It was strategic. She was checking to see if I'd found something, or if maybe someone else had tipped me off. I mumbled something about junk mail, and she moved on to the fridge, unloading almond milk and strawberries. She didn't press. That told me enough. She already knew something had been set in motion. When she left the room to take a call, I returned to the envelope. Something inside it crinkled again. Something I hadn't noticed. A second folded slip, tucked behind the letter. I unfolded it slowly. It was a photocopy, a legal draft, a document from one of my father's attorneys. Succession plan, early draft. My name was listed, alone, under sole beneficiary, not Clive, not either of my brothers, not even Mom, just me. Beneath the typewritten lines, in Dad's unmistakable handwriting, was one final note. "They will come for this. Protect yourself." I stared at it, jaw slack. Every message, every shift in Celeste's behavior, every insult from her family, every strategic move disguised as concern. They weren't just divorcing me. They were trying to remove me before I discovered this. They assumed I had nothing. But someone in their circle suspected the truth. I stood, folding the documents and sliding them back into the envelope, placing it gently inside the drawer of my writing desk. It wasn't rage bubbling up inside me. Not anymore. It was clarity. Dad hadn't chosen me because I was the most ambitious or the loudest. He chose me because I understood how to endure, how to hold ground when the floor shifts, how to outlast storms, not by shouting, but by standing still when others panic. Celeste thought I was weak. Her family had built an entire image of me as some placeholder, but my father saw a legacy, and I wasn't about to waste that. I walked over to the window and watched her in the backyard on the phone, laughing lightly as she paced near the fence. She thought she was ahead. She had no idea what was coming. The key felt small in my pocket, but heavy. Not just in weight, meaning I could still hear Dad's words in my head. You'll understand everything then. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the bank, the afternoon sun had dropped just enough to cast a long shadow across the front windows. The place looked nearly empty, unusually quiet for a weekday. I double-checked the time. 4:11 p.m. Inside, the air was cool and still. The usual background murmur was missing. No clacking keyboards, no chatter at teller stations. It was almost too quiet. That's when I spotted him. Mr. Halverson. Older, tall, thin frame, with a head of white hair that looked like it hadn't moved since the Reagan administration. He stood the moment he saw me, smoothing his tie like he'd been expecting this visit for months. "Mr. Dalton," he said with a solemn nod. "We've been waiting for you." "We?" I followed him past the desks and through a side hallway. He unlocked a door with a coded keypad, then motioned me in. A private office, no windows, one desk, 2 chairs, a small safe bolted to the floor in the corner. He closed the door behind us and locked it. A chill ran up my spine. "Please," he said, gesturing to the seat across from his. "Before we proceed, I'll need 2 forms of identification and a biometric scan." I complied. Driver's license, passport, thumbprint. The scanner beeped softly, then turned green. He stood, walked to the safe, and opened it slowly. I could hear my heartbeat over the hum of the air vent. From inside, he retrieved a compact leather-bound folder and a small, sealed flash drive. He placed them gently in front of me. I reached out, hesitating only a second before flipping the folder open. There it was. My father's will, supplemented by documents from his private holding company. I skimmed. Sole beneficiary, Merrick Dalton. I blinked hard. The valuation numbers. I had to reread them twice. It wasn't just wealth, it was control. Full rights, no stipulations, no conditions. A folded note was tucked into the back. "Do not reveal this until you are certain who stands with you and who stands against you." I swallowed hard. He knew. He knew everything that might come next. That someone, maybe more than one, would try to take this from me, twist it, erase me from my own bloodline. I sat back in the chair, letting the weight of it settle. All these years, I'd assumed I was the footnote in the family, the quiet one, the easy one, the one who'd bowed out of the power games long ago. But he'd seen something different, and now he'd made me the keeper of it all. Outside, the late afternoon sun had shifted again. The shadows in the room stretched longer across the floor as I tucked the documents carefully back inside the folder and rose to leave. The ride home was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. Celeste's voice echoed in my head. "He's harmless, and he pays half the bills." And Clive's comment from the group chat, "Make him look dependent." It all lined up now. The urgency, the coordination, the subtle legal traps. They were trying to push me into signing before anything about my inheritance could become public. Trying to gut my position, shape the narrative. They thought I was flat-footed. They had no idea. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Celeste's car already parked. I glanced at the time. Just before 5:30. The sky had softened into that dusty orange glow that only seems to exist in late Texas afternoons. Inside the house, the air smelled faintly of her perfume. She stood by the kitchen counter, dressed in a slate blue blouse I hadn't seen before. Hair done, lipstick fresh. She looked prepared, not for dinner, for something else. "Hey," she said, smiling lightly. "You're back." "Yeah." She reached behind her and picked up a folder. "I need you to sign something. Just a formality." The way she said it, too casual, like she was trying not to oversell it. What is it? She handed it to me with a rehearsed air of ease. Interim financial agreement. Just to keep things clean while we sort out the paperwork. The top of the document was straightforward enough, but near the bottom, buried in a block of dense legalese, one line stopped me cold. Acknowledges financial reliance on the assets and income provided by the Mercer family estate. I looked up at her, heartbeat pulsing behind my eyes. Why would I need to sign this? She tilted her head, half shrugging. It's just cleaner for the lawyers. My parents want to be clear on how things have been handled financially. You know how they are, neat and buttoned up. I didn't respond, because I saw it now. If I had signed this yesterday, before I opened the lockbox, before I read my father's letter, I would have essentially confirmed their whole argument, that I was a dependent, a drifter, that they'd supported me, and it would have held up in court. It's nothing to stress about, she added, reaching for a pen. Just sign and we can be done with it. I placed the folder flat on the counter, and I didn't touch the pen. I'll need time to look it over. She blinked, clearly caught off guard. There's no need to drag this out, Merrick. Her voice tightened. Her smile faltered. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't smugness. It was fear. I turned and walked toward the study. She called after me, sharper now, clipped. Merrick, don't make this harder than it needs to be. But I didn't stop. They thought I wouldn't see it. They thought I'd keep playing the fool. This was their first trap. It wouldn't be their last. I had just set the folder down on my desk when my phone lit up again. Clive's name, not his personal line, the office number I hadn't seen since before Thanksgiving. The same number he used when things had to appear professional. I didn't want to answer, but something in me said I needed to know what he was playing at. I tapped accept. Merrick. His voice was honey slick, too cheerful. Big misunderstanding earlier. You should swing by the clubhouse. We're having a little get-together. Nothing formal. Come clear the air, have a drink. We're all friends here. His choice of words was deliberate. Clear the air. Friends. It sounded like bait wrapped in velvet. My gut told me to hang up, to stay home, lock the doors, and dig deeper into the files from the bank. But another part of me, one I hadn't trusted in a long time, spoke louder. You need to see it. You need to watch them lie to your face to understand just how far they're willing to go. I'll be there in 30, I said, my voice flat. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and slid into my jacket. Celeste stood in the hallway, arms crossed, pretending to check her phone. You going somewhere? She asked without looking up. Yeah, I said, meeting someone. She didn't ask who, which told me she already knew. I didn't bother to say more, just walked out the door, the scent of her perfume trailing behind me like a warning. The sun was down, and the street lights stretched their orange glow across the roads as I drove. The city felt quieter than usual for a Friday. Or maybe it was just me, too wound up, too aware, too tired. The clubhouse wasn't far. Some upscale pseudo-country club Clive's firm rented out for networking and schmoozing. I'd been there before, back when they still pretended I belonged. Tonight, the parking lot was full. Too full. I parked off to the side, near the hedge-lined path. The moment I stepped out, laughter floated through the air, loud, forced, like a sitcom laugh track with the volume cranked too high. Inside, the bar was bustling. Warm light, polished surfaces, crystal glasses catching the light like little traps. People I barely recognized, old business acquaintances, Celeste's distant cousins, Clive's coworkers, greeted me with thin smiles and overeager nods. "Merrick," one of them called, clapping me on the shoulder. "Glad you made it, man." Too glad. There was something off in their eyes. Sympathy? No. Pity. Performed pity. Like they knew something I didn't, or thought I didn't. I scanned the room. Then I spotted Clive near the back, holding court by the bar. His shirt sleeves rolled, his drink raised, all confidence and cologne. "Merrick," he called, striding over. "You came. That's great." He wrapped an arm around my shoulder, firm, possessive, and steered me toward the center of the room. "Glad you're here," he said again, louder now. "We've all been worried about you." I pulled away gently, faking a half smile. "Yeah, I'm sure." Then it happened. Clive tapped a spoon against a glass, ping, ping, and raised his voice. "Everyone, quick word." The room fell quiet, not silent. There was still the clink of ice, the shuffle of feet, but it was clear. He had their attention. Clive lifted his glass. "We all know Merrick's been going through a rough patch lately. Some unexpected turns, right?" Light laughter rippled through the crowd. He grinned, eyes scanning the room like a host introducing a magician. "And you know Celeste told us he's had a tough time keeping up, so we decided to help him out a little. Just something small." He gestured to a table by the fireplace. A stack of envelopes, gift cards, checks, cash. "A little fundraiser," he said, beaming. "To get him back on his feet." The crowd erupted in applause. Someone whistled. A few even shouted things like, "We've got your back, buddy," and "Hang in there." My feet didn't move. My arms hung useless at my sides. The world around me blurred at the edges as heat flushed up my neck. This wasn't charity. This was war. They had crafted a perfect story. Merrick Dalton, the lost husband, the financial burden, the poor soul fallen on hard times. And now they were making a spectacle of it. Not out of kindness, but strategy. Miriam, in the corner, held up her phone, filming the entire thing, smiling like she was capturing a family reunion. I turned to Clive. His grin was sharp. And in that moment, something cracked, not in a loud, dramatic way, but a quiet, clean snap inside me. They weren't just trying to take my dignity. They were trying to record it. I took a step forward. The room went still. They expected an outburst, a tantrum, a confirmation of the unstable label they were sewing into the narrative. I inhaled, slow, steady. My chest burned with humiliation, but I didn't give them what they wanted. Not yet. I looked around the room, held each stare a little longer than necessary. Then I walked to the table, picked up one of the envelopes, read the name on it, then gently set it back down. I turned to Clive, moved closer. He leaned in, smug and satisfied. His breath reeked of whiskey. "You sign the agreement tomorrow," he whispered, "or this gets worse." I met his eyes. He still didn't know what I'd seen today, what I now held in my home office, what my father had left me. He still thought I was playing defense. I didn't say a word. I just walked past him, out of the room, out into the night. Their laughter buzzed behind me like flies. It stung, but it no longer touched me the same way. Because I'd finally seen it all. Every angle, every mask. They had tried to make me into a symbol of weakness. Instead, they had given me clarity. I reached the car, hand trembling just slightly as I turned the key in the ignition. But as I pulled onto the road and headed back toward the house, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, close, too close. And I didn't realize until I reached my driveway that someone had followed me home. I pulled into the driveway, Headlights still glaring behind me. They didn't turn off. No one honked. No engine door opened. I waited a moment, engine running, hand resting on the gear shift, ready to back out if I had to. Then the driver's door of the trailing car creaked open. A man stepped out, mid-40s, tall, trim, wearing a navy blazer over a wrinkled dress shirt. He held a slim folder under one arm like it might explode if he gripped it wrong. His face was unreadable, but his posture was cautious, like he knew this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. He raised a hand. "Mr. Dalton?" I rolled down my window halfway, keeping the car running. "Who's asking?" He took a step forward but didn't come too close. "Name's Thomas Landry. I'm with Holloway and Pierce. Your father worked with us, off and on, over the years." I narrowed my eyes. "You followed me from the clubhouse?" He gave a small nod. "I've been trying to contact you for over a week. Phone, email, someone's been intercepting my messages." The way he said it wasn't a guess. It was a statement. I killed the engine and stepped out of the car, folding my arms. "You have 5 minutes." He glanced around, lowered his voice. "I'd rather speak inside, but if you're more comfortable out here." I motioned toward the porch. "Talk." We sat on opposite ends of the bench swing. Thomas set the folder on his lap and exhaled as though he'd been holding in a storm. "Your father," he began, "made some substantial legal updates to his estate before he passed. Changes involving succession, asset protection, corporate holdings. Very few people knew. I was one of them." I didn't interrupt. He continued. "We were supposed to schedule a formal announcement, a disclosure to the board, the partners, the family. That announcement never happened." My throat tightened. "Because he died?" "Yes, and because..." He paused. "Someone acted fast to suppress the remaining documents." "Celeste's family," I said flatly. He nodded. "They've made several inquiries to our office under various names. One even claimed to be your legal counsel. We caught it, but it flagged enough that I started looking deeper." Thomas opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, legal memos, and at the top, a copy of a non-disclosure agreement bearing the Dalton family crest, one I'd never seen before. "This," he said, "was meant to be destroyed, but I kept a copy, just in case, and it turns out, just in case is right now." I flipped through the pages, scanning subject lines. Then I saw it. A thread of emails between Miriam McAdams, Celeste's mother, and a private investigations firm based out of Houston. Subject: Urgent vetting request, Merrick Dalton. Attached: fabricated reports, mental health assessments, notes suggesting I was emotionally unstable and financially reckless. My blood froze. There were phrases like exhibits irrational outbursts and history of instability, all of it fake, all of it signed off as preliminary psychological concern with a fake therapist's name attached. I looked at Thomas. They were going to present this in court? Worse, he said, they were going to leak it, smear you publicly first, then move to freeze your access to assets. I sat back, gripping the porch rail. Thomas tapped a USB drive nestled in the folder's spine. "This contains a recorded call from earlier today. Miriam left a voicemail by accident. Or maybe she thought she hung up." He hesitated. "She's bragging. Said, and I quote, 'After tonight, the court will eat from our hands.'" My fists clenched. They weren't just trying to hurt me. They were trying to erase me. Thomas leaned forward, voice low. "This is enough for a defamation suit, possibly criminal fraud. But more importantly, it's enough to stop them in their tracks, if we move quickly." I nodded slowly, mind racing. This wasn't about reacting anymore. It was about leading. I brought Thomas inside. We spread the documents across the dining table, lining them up like puzzle pieces, finally finding their shape. The inheritance files, the forged psychiatric assessments, the fundraiser trap at the clubhouse, the voicemail, even the attempt to intercept communications. Thomas had documented each failed message attempt with timestamps and screenshots. It was airtight. Why now? I asked. Why bring this tonight? Because they filed an emergency petition with family court this evening, he said, claiming you're incapable of managing shared assets. My stomach dropped. They want temporary control over marital finances. Once that's granted, they'll escalate, move to invalidate your inheritance, say you're mentally unfit, that you fabricated the will, everything. And if I hadn't seen this? I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I stood, running a hand down my face. Then I looked up, a calm rising inside me. Not peace, not quite, but something sharper, determination. They made a mistake, I said. Thomas tilted his head. Which part? They thought I'd fold. I gathered the papers back into the folder. We file tomorrow? First thing, he said, and we do it publicly. When Thomas left, the house was silent. Too silent. I stepped into the living room and saw her, Celeste, sitting on the edge of the couch, arms folded, jaw tense. She was still in the same outfit from earlier, but now her posture screamed expectation. She'd been waiting. Where were you? She asked, voice clipped. I didn't answer. I simply walked past her and placed the folder gently on the coffee table. Her eyes locked onto it, then to me, then back again. Her voice cracked. Merrick, what is that? I sat across from her, elbows on my knees, staring at her without speaking. She shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable. You don't know what you're doing, she said, trying to sound in control. You don't understand what's happening. Oh, I said, almost too quietly. I understand more than you think. She froze. For a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. Fear. Real fear. And then, from the doorway behind her, her father stepped into the room, smiling like he still believed he was in control. Her father stepped inside with a slow, confident stride, as if the house belonged to him and I was only borrowing space. The porch light washed across his face, giving him that polished certainty he always carried like a badge. He glanced at Celeste first, then at the folder resting on the coffee table, before fixing his eyes on me. Merrick, he said, smoothing down the front of his jacket, we need to talk. This little resistance of yours, it ends tonight. His tone wasn't angry. It was managerial, the way a CEO corrects an employee for stepping out of line. Celeste hovered behind him, pale and caught between fear and irritation, as if she didn't know whether to stand beside him or retreat. I stayed still, no raised voice, no sudden movements, just focus. He stepped closer and placed a set of papers on the table. You sign this, he said, tapping the top page, and everything stays quiet. Celeste walks away clean. You avoid a very public spectacle. The threat wasn't hidden. It was wrapped in courtesy. I opened the packet slowly, not to read it, but to make a point that I wasn't intimidated. Then I closed it and slid it back across the table. I'm not signing anything, I said, voice even. His jaw tightened. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. But the balance had already shifted. He didn't know it yet. I reached for my own folder, laid it gently beside his, and opened it wide enough for him to see the first page. His eyes flicked down, then widened. There it was. the inheritance documentation naming me sole successor, followed by the fabricated behavioral reports, then the intercepted emails, then the voicemail transcript, his wife bragging about manipulating the court. Celeste gasped. Her father's confidence cracked like glass under heat. "You planned to ruin me," I said quietly. "But now you've given me everything I need to show exactly what you've done." He tried to gather himself. "This is all out of context." I shook my head. "Context won't matter to a judge, or the state bar, or the business press." Celeste's voice trembled. "Merrick, please, we can talk about this. We can fix it." But her tears didn't move me this time. I was done mistaking emotion for honesty. I met her eyes with calm clarity. "You could have talked to me. You chose betrayal instead." She flinched as if the truth itself struck her. Her father snapped the packet closed and stood straight. "You'll hear from our attorney." "No," I replied. "You'll hear from mine." The weight of that sentence hung heavy between us. He didn't argue. He just grabbed the papers, avoiding eye contact, and marched toward the door. Celeste lingered. One foot pointed toward the exit. One still anchored to the floor, waiting, hoping, maybe, that I'd offer something to soften the blow. Forgiveness, excuse, weakness. I gave her nothing but honesty. "Goodbye, Celeste." She inhaled, sharply, then walked out without looking back. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and the house shifted into an unfamiliar stillness. For the first time in months, the quiet wasn't hostile. It wasn't judgmental or heavy with expectation. It was simply quiet. I sat down, elbows resting on my knees, letting the exhaustion flow through me. I wasn't celebrating. There was no victory in what happened. It was survival. But survival carries its own quiet triumph. Hours slipped by. Somewhere around dawn, pale sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting warm stripes across the living room floor. I thought of my father, his letter, his trust, his belief that I carried something worth protecting. For the first time in my life, I believed it too. I stepped out onto the porch. The early morning air felt cooler, almost cleaner, like something heavy had finally drifted away. The neighborhood was still just waking up. I took a slow breath, feeling something settle inside me. Not vengeance, not triumph, freedom. I walked back into the house, the sun warming my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I felt like my life finally belonged to me again.